Hello, everybody. Happy Monday to you. I hope this is finding you all well. We had a really beautiful weekend. We have a little bit of rain in the future, so let's see if in the forecast, let's see if that actually happens. I wouldn't mind a little more for spring, but we will see. So we started digging into the materials a couple weeks ago. In the first week of the book, you had 2 chapters to go through. And the second week, last week, you had 2 chapters to go through. And the good news is now we're going to go into a little stretch of where you just have 1 chapter a week. The material gets a little more, starts to get more important, starts to get a little more involved. But again, there's just 1. So that means that you'll have 1 quiz, and then your typical discussion, reflection, observation, and then of course your reply to this video. So, so that's a good thing that, that'll be that way for a little while. I think it only happens a couple more times where we have to put 2 in together to end up where I need to end up. So we have gone back to the foundations. If we just sort of jump back as a quick recap, and you learned about Stephen Foster, and you learned about ragtime, and you learned about Tin Pan Alley, and jazz, and blues with country blues, and Delta blues, and urban blues, and we've been moving forward, and then we get into rhythm and blues, and rhythm and blues really is exactly what it sounds like. So rhythm and blues is this combination of blues chord progression, that 3-chord progression, 12-bar blues, combined with dance rhythms that were influenced out of and sort of co-influenced, jazz, and which came out of ragtime and all of that, right? Big band, everything. So it all came together, and rhythm and blues was really a black style of music. So that was known, and that's why when we learned last week about rock and roll, it was a big deal, but in some ways it was just a renaming of something. And I'll give you a different kind of example. I don't think I mentioned this last week, but we're going to learn down the line a little bit about rap and hip hop. And back in the day, hip hop did not refer to music. It referred to a culture of which rap was the music. But after gangster rap and the term rap started to become sort of loaded and had negative connotations to it, that's when hip hop started being used more as a musical term. Now, arguably, you could say today that rap and hip hop are different. I don't know. You're sort of parsing words and terms, and there's all sorts of gray areas, as you're already probably seeing in the history of rock and pop music and all of that. So what happens is, Alan Freed is the famous DJ that sort of coins the term rock and roll. The term already really existed, but basically what he did was he renamed rhythm and blues so that it was safe for white audiences, safe for the kids. They could tell their parents they're listening to Elvis. Now, there was a lot of people that didn't like the rock and roll stuff anyways, but that's sort of how that came about. And rock and roll, the height of rock and roll was really only maybe, say, 5 to 6 years at the most. And as you learned by the end of the chapter, you have all these issues with, Elvis gets drafted, Chuck Berry gets arrested, Little Richard gives up music for preaching, Buddy Holly dies in a plane crash, and along with Richie Valens and the Big Bopper, and it changes the landscape. And so what happens is rock and roll, which existed for this very short window, kind of went away. And, then something came in and filled that void. Now, again, to understand through the course of this class, as we start covering more about genres, we're not always going chronological. So we'll move forward, then we'll jump back, we'll move forward, then we'll jump back. And also not everything exists like in this vacuum, and it's not like it's like, okay, January 1st, 1960, a new style of music happens. Doesn't work that way. All these things are bubbling around, and then certain things rise to the top and go back down and all of that. And so what happens is rock and roll, rhythm and blues becomes popular because of what Elvis did. It made not only white artists, it opened the doors for them. That's why Elvis is such an important game changer in rock and roll, probably the most important. But then, of course, it also opened the doors for popularity for these black artists that couldn't necessarily break through because of the way that the world was divided racially and all of that. So these things happen, it kind of goes away, and then this style of music rises up, and then sort of overlaps. We have Ed Sullivan Show, we have American Bandstand, we have these shows where, young kids are dancing, dances start to become a big thing, the Watusi and the Pony and, all those different things. And Chubby Checker comes along with the twist. And the twist is the huge game changer in a lot of ways, because it was a song that was loved and appreciated by white and black audiences. Chubby Checker was black. Obviously not his name. Nobody would name their kid Chubby. So you'll learn with some of these folks obviously have different names. And Chubby Checker took his name, if you will, from Fats Domino, right? So they're like, okay, well, we got to come up with what we call a stage name. And so with Chubby Checker, they're like, okay, well, you got Fats Domino, Chubby Checker. You can see the connection, right? So the twist really starts to break down barriers. And we learned about doo-wop and rhythm and blues, and all of those are filtering through. They're influencing these things. And then as we move into the 60s, you have this rise of dance songs and what we call teen idol pop. So these young rock and rollers, Elvis and the others, you had this huge teen audience. And the music business people were very savvy, and they saw that, and they're like, hey, we've got a market. And I talked about this in the last video. And it's like really important that the teen audience now, because it's post-World War II, they have a little spending money, they are very aggressively marketed too. And so that brought about the rise of what we call the teen idol pop and these teen idols. And I want you to spend time listening to it, thinking about it, because you're going to have a question related to it. And as I often do, it's connected also to what is happening. I have noticed that only maybe about a quarter of the class actually so far has watched my reminder video from Thursday. And I talk about that a little bit in there and just things to be mindful of. But the teen idol pop arises, and basically what it's doing is it's creating this fictitious, boyfriend or girlfriend thing, something that still exists today. The book will talk about it, the materials will talk about it, but that really rises to the top, along with a lot of the dance styles of music. Dance TV shows become very popular, as I mentioned. And then on the West Coast, there's a style of music that becomes popular known as surf music. And it is what it sounds, right? On the West Coast, we have that surfing culture. And so surf music, largely instrumental. And you have folks like Dick Dale and the Deltones, the Surfaris, the Chantals, and other folks. And so the Ventures, and you'll learn about that. And then that leads us into the Beach Boys. And the Beach Boys were incredibly popular band because they were a huge influence on the Beatles. Now, in addition to the teen idol pop and the surf music, you had this music scene out of New York called the Brill Building, which was really, it's sort of the continuation of Tin Pan Alley. And you had this record label, Alden Music, and you had these songwriters. And back in those days, it was common for songwriters to work in pairs. So you generally had a composer and a lyricist. And then also in popular music at that time, it was rare for an artist to perform original songs. Elvis didn't write at all. He didn't perform any original songs. Some did. Buddy Holly did. Carl Perkins did some. Chuck Berry did, of course. Little Richard. But as you get into the more pop world, you have entertainers that are performing songs written by songwriters. And so at Alden Music, you have Jerry Goffin and Carole King, you have Neil Sedaka, you have Lieber and Stoller, you have these folks that are writing songs for other people, and it becomes a big industry. So you're going to learn about that. And out of that scene, we learn about Phil Spector, who was a really important producer who created what was called his Wall of Sound, which would go on to influence the Beach Boys and the Beatles, and even more recently, people like Bruce Springsteen. It was a big influence on his sound, particularly in the 70s. So you're going to learn about all of that, and that's really going to focus this week. So take the time to learn about it, to listen to the music, to listen to the playlist, to watch the videos. Remember, it's a music class. So take all of this material in. You can always reach out to me if you have questions or things like that. A couple reminders. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll ask it now. Which is to reply for this video for your assignment, which will be open until Thursday. What date was the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper? Now, some of you may know the song American Pie by Don McLean, and I will put it below this video in the announcement. But that song, which is about the day the music died, that's what it's referring to, is that plane crash. And that song is an amazing rock history lesson in and of itself. It's a little cryptic, but you got to follow through. But if you do, it's an amazing rock history lesson. But so I want you to reply to this video with the date of that plane crash. Okay, that's that. So here are some reminders. Thursdays at noon are now when your window to reply to the welcome video ends. It'll be that way for the rest of the semester. I realized that a lot of people were waiting till the end of the weekend, and the problem is that you can't really do the work if I'm not setting the context. I mean, I guess you can, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to help you. So I want to make sure that everybody's watched it by noon on Thursday so that you have that context set. Hopefully you're watching it, Monday. That's the goal. Before you get into anything, watch the videos. That sets the context, gives you any announcements, and then you roll into the material. So for your discussion, I'm seeing some great stuff coming in. I'm really liking the way that I've divided things up into the 3 groups. Sometimes I'll reply. Sometimes I just peek in and lurk and see what's going on. I don't want to get in the way of the conversation too much, but I want you to really think about what you're learning. And then same with the reflection observation. Really think about what you're learning. I mentioned this in the video on Thursday, but I want to mention it again. These assignments are not about research. So I don't want you to go Google the topic. I want you to think about what you're learning in the class. The quizzes are about facts. The tests, test 1, which by the way is coming up in a couple weeks, those are really about like facts. But these things are about how are you processing what you're learning and then able to sort of come up with a coherent thought about what it is. And that's why I'm always wrapping in something about current music. And if you don't know the current music, don't just say, oh, I don't know current music. That's kind of the easy way out. Go check the pop charts on Spotify and YouTube and look what's going on. Dig in, explore the world. You may or may not like it, but that's part of the class. That's part of learning. So that goes for both of those. And my suggestion is don't wait till the last minute. Take the time, put the care into it, work early, give yourself a buffer zone. I don't know if I've mentioned it in this class, but this isn't about the piece of paper at the end, right? It's not about the degree. I have 2 degrees. They're sitting in my garage somewhere. It's about what you've learned along the journey. And there's a lot to learn, not just about music specifically, but also about the world and the world that we live in this class, which is part of why I love teaching it so much. So that's it. I already told you what the reply thing is. So go ahead and do that. Have a great week. I will send out my reminders. I always send out a Thursday reminder. I always send out a Sunday reminder. I had a student reach out to me and say, oh, I didn't know this thing was due then. That just means you're not reading the materials or watching the videos or doing any of that, because I give you plenty of warning. I am here to help you. I want you to succeed. I want you to do great in this class. So have a great week. Let's see if it rains. Answer the question, and I will talk to you soon.